Last Friday was Juneteenth, and many churches today are having a service in honor of Juneteenth. So I looked for a prayer that would relate to that, and I found this prayer on the Xavier University's website for such a service. The author, Phil Chick, presents a couple personal thoughts. Those are in italics at the top. And even though it doesn't work for everybody to pray together without being muted, even though you're muted, I invite you to either just read along or actually say it out loud as I read it. I don't have the answers, and I don't yet know what I will do today or tomorrow to be the change I want to see. I know I'll need strength to step outside my comfort zone and walk with my brothers and sisters on this journey. I don't yet know how I will do it, but I know I must try. Bless us as we strive to find our way to true racial reconciliation. Open our eyes to all that goes on around us that contributes to racial injustice. Grant us the knowledge to understand all that we do, both personally and as a society, which prevents us from recognizing and defending the dignity of all of our brothers and sisters, and especially at this time, our brothers and sisters of color who are now feeling so much pain. Grant us the grace to reflect on our own actions and inactions that contribute to this pain, and grant us the strength to take action to alleviate this pain and to end racial injustice in all its forms. In your name we pray. Amen.
The first lesson is from Jeremiah chapter 20, verses 7 through 13. And this is after Jeremiah has been having to claim lots of destruction for Israel and make bad proclamations for his country because they're doing such terrible things. And he's getting tired of telling people how everything's going to be destroyed because that's not how you make friends. And so this is his prayer in that kind of a situation. O Lord, you have deceived me, and I was deceived. You overpowered me and won. I've been made fun of all day long. Everyone mocks me. Each time I speak, I have to cry out and shout, violence and destruction. The word of the Lord has made me the object of insults and contempt all day long. I think to myself, I can forget the Lord and no longer speak his name. But his word is inside me like a burning fire, shut up in my bones. I wear myself out, holding it in, but I can do it no longer. I have heard many people whispering, terror is everywhere. Report him, let's report him. All my closest friends are waiting to see me stumble. They say, maybe he will be tricked. Then we can overpower him and take revenge on him. But the Lord is on my side like a terrifying warrior. That is why those who persecute me will stumble. They cannot win. They will be very ashamed that they cannot succeed. Their eternal shame will not be forgotten. But the Lord of armies examines the righteous. He sees their motives and thoughts. I want to see you take revenge on them because I brought my case to you. Sing to the Lord, praise the Lord. He has rescued the lives of needy people from the power of wicked people. That's the first lesson. And our gospel comes from Matthew chapter 10, verses 24 through 39. A student is not better than his teacher, nor a slave better than his owner. It is enough for a student to become like his teacher or a slave like his owner. If they have called the owner of the house Beelzebul, they will certainly call all the family members the same name. So don't be afraid of them. Nothing has been covered that will not be exposed. Whatever is secret will be made known. Tell in the daylight what I say to you in the dark. Shout from the housetops what you hear whispered. Don't be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Instead, fear the one who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Aren't 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Not one of them will fall to the ground without your Father's permission. Every hair on your head has been counted. Don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. So I will acknowledge in front of my Father in heaven that person who acknowledges me in front of others. But I will tell my Father in heaven that I don't know the person who tells others that he doesn't know me. Don't think that I have come to bring peace to earth. I didn't come to bring peace, but conflict. I came to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A person's enemies will be the members of his own family. The person who loves his father and mother more than me does not deserve to be my disciple. The person who loves a son or daughter more than me does not deserve to be my disciple. Whoever doesn't take up his cross and follow me doesn't deserve to be my disciple. The person who tries to preserve his life will lose it, but the person who loses his life for me will preserve it. Here ends the reading.
So Pastor Dave wanted me to choose a story that I liked and thought would speak to some of the things going on. And so I've chosen a fairly short story. I don't know if Tessa heard this before. It is a different story than what we were doing. Okay. But I was going to talk about the story behind the hymn Amazing Grace. I still would like to tell that story sometime, but I did not have a chance to really put it together. So this is a different story called Once Was a Man. So once there was a man who spent his entire life in service towards others. He owned a bakery. He would give food away. If there were people who were poor, he would lend money. He would invite people to come in and stay with him. He was a person who was always looking for ways to help others. Well, he was noticed by God. And as you know, God up in heaven was doing his ledgers one day and was noticing that this man's name came up over and over and over and over again. Well, he turned to his head angel and he said, this man is a very, very good man. I think we should reward him. You go down and you ask this man what he needs in life to make his life more rich and fulfilling. A reward for his faithfulness and his generosity to others. So the angel went down, knocked on the man's door, and back in those days, it wasn't unusual to see angels walking with men. And so when the man opened the door and he saw this angel standing there, he welcomed him in. He wasn't surprised at all. He offered him some tea. He offered him some bread. They sat down. They started to chat. And soon it came round to the angel saying, the Lord of hosts has noticed your generosity, your bigness of heart, and would like to reward you. Is there something that you would like? So the man, he scratched his unkempt beard and he gazed out the window and he thought and he pondered and then he came back to the head angel and kind of embarrassed said, well, you know, there is something that I have long wondered about. And I was wondering, before I die, would it be possible for me to see hell and to see heaven? Now, the angel was so taken back that she was mid-sip in her tea and she nearly spit the tea out, but she gathered herself and she said, of course, take my hand, but do not lack for courage. And so he took her hand and they went down past the the moles' houses. They went down past the treasure chests. They went down past ancient civilizations that had been long resting. They went down past layer after layer after layer after layer of earth. And finally, they came to hell. She let his hand go and she said, "Welcome to hell." Now the man opened his eyes and he looked around, and there weren't flames or furnaces or things with tails, and there was a cool breeze that hit his face, and as he looked out he could see a meadow, green and lush, and it was rimmed by a forest, and in the meadow there were tables covered, loaded with food. Food that looked like maybe there was a wedding celebration, or maybe it was Thanksgiving, or the food was practically falling off of the tables. Around the tables were seated people, but even though there was so much food, they were thin and emaciated. They didn't speak. They were sad. And then the man noticed that their arms were shackled. They were shackled so that they could not bend their arms. And each one of them had in their hand a spoon, but they could not take the food and lift it to their mouths. They moaned in their agony. And finally the man said to the angel, I can't watch this anymore. I cannot, we need to leave. And she said, "Take my hand." And once again, they traveled up through the layers of the earth, and they went through past the mole hill. They went past a squirrel's nest. They went past the eyrie of an eagle. They went past the sun. They went through the layers of the space, up, up, up. And finally, she let go of his hand and she said, "Welcome to heaven." And he opened his eyes and he looked around, and he didn't hear any choirs of angels singing. He didn't hear or see any angels like sitting on a cloud. There were no golden harps being played, and that puzzled him, of course. And in fact, when he looked around, he saw a meadow, much like that had been in hell. And he saw it rimmed by a forest. And in the meadow, there were tables, and they were laden with food. Food was just overflowing. And around those tables, there were people. And they were laughing, and they were talking, and they were joking with each other, and none of them seemed to be lacking for anything. They all seemed to be healthy and happy. And he also noticed that they too had shackles holding their arms from bending. He was puzzled. He looked at the angel and he said, "This looks very much like hell. In fact, it looks exactly like hell, but it's so different. Why? What makes the difference?" And the angels said, "Watch." And so the man watched, and he watched a little closer, and he noticed that each of them had a spoon in their hands, and each of them would take a bit of food and their spoon, and they would feed their neighbors. And when he saw them feeding their neighbors, he knew what the big difference was. And he was happy, and he was content, and he was ready to go home. And so when I was thinking about this story, and I was thinking about the times that we're in, the thing that speaks to me the most, and I'd actually like to open this up to any observations that you think of, is the relationship that everybody is shackled, but it's what we choose to do when we are shackled that makes all the difference in the world, and that we're called to help each other to overcome those shackles. We're called to, we're obligated actually to feed each other. And not only obligated to feed each other physically, but I think the thing that happens most for us when we feed each other is that we feed ourselves. And it is through that feeding of ourselves that we are able to be truly human. And the other thing I noticed is that there's plenty of food, and there's no reason that anybody should be starving. And it's the choices that we make as humans to allow for that to happen. When I actually didn't know the readings from today, but when Brent was reading and it said, "Don't think I came to bring peace to earth." I think we need to be, until everybody is able to feed their neighbors, that I don't think there should be peace on earth, that we should be uneasy and not settled in ourselves until we are able to make sure that everybody is fed. So now I would just really like to just open it up to anybody who wants to add anything to what you might have noticed in the story, or any connections that you want to bring into whatever you're thinking about.
Pam, when you mentioned the comfort, when I was looking for a prayer, I found a very short prayer that I almost chose, and it was comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I thought that kind of says it all.
Kathleen, did you want to say something? Well, if there's nobody else, I mean, feel free to, of course,
I struggle with learning how to give love away, but when I do give love and attention and compassion to someone else, it seems that it comes back to me, and then I can be empowered to go do more. So I think that this relationship is what you mentioned here, and once that relationship is established, it works better to do this than to be thinking totally of oneself. So it's a struggle for me, but I do know that what I give away in some way comes back through other people. So thank you for your reading, for your prayer.
so we're going to move on to Tessa. And so I had originally told the council that I was going to tell the story behind John Newton's Amazing Grace hymn. And I'll just tell you a very brief, I wasn't really able to get the story totally in hand. So I didn't want to tell it in its complete form. But I think the thing that Amazing Grace is one of those hymns that people have fallen back upon for the civil rights movement, for generations. People have fallen back onto this hymn, and the reason is if you know the history behind the hymn, it makes it even more poignant. So John Newton was, as a young boy, he lost his mother. Before she died, he was about 7 years old when she died. He had a very strong relationship with her, and she was able to instill a love of the Bible and a love of learning in him. But once she died, his life really went off the rails. He went to sea with his father when he was 11, apprenticed to become a Oh. I'm not muted.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. He was such a despicable person that even even how rough and crude many seamen were, he was despised by even them. He became, so he worked on some ships for a while, and then he became a slaver, rounding up Africans and bringing them into the slave trade. He was also a slave captain of a slave ship for a while. And the big turning point for him was when he was returning on a boat called the Greyhound from Africa to England. They ran into this enormous storm, and as the boat was hour after hour being pushed around by the sea, and people were being literally washed off of the deck, he was struggling with the wheel and trying to keep the boat afloat. And he cried out to God and asked for mercy. And he made a promise that he would devote himself to God and change. And he made it through 11 hours of fighting with the ocean. But the thing about when we make promises to God, and I think this is actually the thing that speaks to me the most about the story, is that he stopped cussing immediately. He started reading the Bible. Well, I mean, that's okay, but he was a slave trader. And he kept kind of justifying, well, you know, he didn't take as many slaves. He gave them a little bit more room. He gave them a little more food. He would wash them off, you know, daily. He would, and he kind of justified that, oh, it's okay if I do that. But his conscience kept noodling at him, and he finally gave up the slave trade. Well, it took him quite a few years and then he went on a path and actually became a preacher. But his conscience kept nagging at him for what he had done and the inhumanity of the slave trade. And so he actually wrote things, and he worked in Parliament. He worked with parliamentarians in order to change the law and abolish slavery in England. So it was this huge journey. And the thing that I think stands out for me is just the incrementalness of it. The fact that it's really hard to go from, 0 to 100. And he did not. God slowly worked with him, showed him grace, and was able to slowly make his heart bigger, and was able to change him and change this person. So with all that being said, we are going to do the hymn Amazing Grace, and Tessa is going to play it for us. We're going to stay muted so that we can sing it along with her.
Okay, we're figuring out the sound here at our house because we have too many technological gadgets. And the kids are over there trying to figure that one out, but now Erin's gonna go rescue them. Like Pam said, we're going to sing Amazing Grace. Sam was gonna be our cameraman for the text. I'm not sure if he's going to be brave enough to do that or not. We'll find out, so give us a minute. we're almost set up. Good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Does somebody have an offering to share? I'm looking. Wave your arms if you. I have one.
Crystal.
I don't have an offering to share, but I wonder if we could just go quickly around and everybody could tell us the memory of their father. Something that they especially remember when they think about their father. And I remember my dad taking us swimming, and he was a really good swimmer, and we would hang on his neck and he would dive under the water with us. We thought he was just wonderful to take us little, girls and do that with us. And we've always loved the water and the swimming. And I've always, when I think of my dad, I think of him taking me into some place that was really scary, but not being scared because I could hang on to him and I knew I'd be safe.
Good.
Thank you, Crystal. Anybody else, if they want to share, I'll wave your hand and I'll unmute you.
Aaron, you wave your hand?
You'll need to unmute yourself, Dennis.
There, okay.
There we go.
Okay. I remember my father from the time that I was about 2 years old. He would always take me fishing with him. And I don't know if I caught the fish, but when we got home, I would be the one that got to hold the trout. And we've got pictures of that. And I think of the love that he showed to me for just being out there with me and teaching me about fishing and teaching me about life. So I was very blessed.
Thank you, Dennis. Anyone else?
Kathleen?
Kathleen?
I remember a time with Crystal talking about feeling safe with her father, and I remember a time we were at a fair of some kind. I was very little, and I wanted to go on the tilt-a-whirl. I wanted to go, and so my dad took me on it. My mother and my little sister stayed on the firm ground, and they were the smart ones. So the thing started going, and I hated it. I was scared to death. That whirls you around and all that centrifugal force, and my head was pushed back against the back of the container that you're in, and I was so scared. I hated it. Well, finally, we got to a point where I was able to lift my head up a little bit, and I moved it over onto my dad's shoulder. And then I felt so much better because at least, you know, I had my dad right there and my head was on his shoulder and I felt safer. I have never, ever, ever gone on a tilt-a-whirl since then, but I still remember that one ride on the tilt-a-whirl and my head on my dad's shoulder, feeling safe with him.
Thank you, Kathleen. Anyone else?
Nothing here.
Jonathan, yeah.
Yeah, my father was a great fisherman too. And I remember even from my childhood when we went to Vermont, we lived in New Jersey at the time, and he would go out in the streams and come in with trout, which we would have for meals. When we moved to Minnesota, he was happy to be in the land of 10,000 lakes, and we fished a lot at Cabacona Lake. And I've taken it up here at Tabor Lake in Wisconsin. We're sitting in Mary's sister's cabin here where there's a connection, and I'm looking out over the lake thinking I'm going to go out and see if I can catch some more fish tonight. It's a good place. It's nice to be able to see you all again from this distance. We're at Tabor Lake near Danbury, Wisconsin. Inherited cabin, best way to get one. Mary's parents had this cabin for years and years. And her sister and brother also have cabins here, and we're in the sister's cabin. So.
My father, unlike yours, Crystal, had the fear of water incredibly worked into him. They lived close to Lake Michigan, and the grandma was incredibly worried that my father would, and all of her kids would drown at sea or out at the ocean. So he was incredibly afraid of water. I didn't really know that though until probably I was a teenager, because he would, as we would go to the lake, I mean, he never swam, but he stood in the water and we would swim around him and, you know, jump out. He would throw us and do all the other things, but his tolerance of the water was, because he was deathly afraid of it. Even in the Army, he had to take some kind of a swimming test. Well, he couldn't swim if his life depended on it. And somehow they made some kind of a switcheroo and somebody else was able to take the test for him. So he was able to be commissioned as an officer. But he, even though he was afraid of the water, he stood in the water and he wanted to make sure we would enjoy it. So that was kind of a corollary experience with my father that you brought to mind, Crystal.
Thank you, Brent. Anybody else like to share? Oh, somebody behind you, Brent.
Caroline has learned the ukulele and would like to sing a song with the ukulele.
Okay.
Stand up and get close and be plenty loud. Okay. I can't hear you. You want to sing alone?
No,
I can't hear.
you tell Grandma he can't hear. You want to sit down, okay. It's easier to play the ukulele if she sits down.
Okay.
He
Thank you very much. Okay, before we move into breakout groups, let's close with a prayer. Eternal God, by whose power we are created and by whose love we are redeemed, guide and strengthen us by your Spirit, that we may give ourselves to your service and live this day in love to one another and to you. Amen.